Hey everyone, this is Lynn Bartown, and you are listening to the A.P.E.X. Hour on KSUU Thunder 91.1. In this show, you get more personal time with the guests who visit Southern Utah University from all over, learning more about their stories and opinions beyond their presentations on stage. We will also give you some new music to listen to and hope to turn you on to some new sounds and new genres. You can find us here every Thursday at 3 p.m. or on the web at suu.edu/apex. But for now, welcome to this week's show here on Thunder 91.1. Okay, well, welcome to the A.P.E.X. Hour, everybody. This is so exciting to be here. I have four super awesome people here, and it's summer at SUU. And today, our topic is experiential learning. And we here at SUU are really embracing this concept of high-impact learning, experiential learning. And we actually had a conference just a couple of weeks back in Arizona where all my guests today attended. And so I thought we'd kind of do a debriefing on that and the things we learned, and also just talk about this topic of experiential learning and, what it means to us at SUU and the kinds of things that we do with it. So it's kind of a roundtable discussion today. So the first thing I'd love to do is just kind of go around and let everybody introduce themselves and just say what they do for SUU. Sylvia, do you want to start?
Sure. So I'm Sylvia Kozlowska, and I teach in the American Language and Culture Center here at SUU, which is an ESL program for international students who are not quite ready with their language proficiency to enter a degree-seeking program. So we kind of step in and help them out with academic language and academic culture.
Awesome. And you do so much experiential teaching. I can't wait to get into that.
Yes, I'm excited about it.
All right, next.
I'm Patrick Clark. I'm the Dean of the School of Integrative and Engaged Learning, and we are the home to many of the fun and innovative programs at the university, including the EDGE program, which is a university graduation requirement that promotes experiential learning for students. So really excited to be here today, Lynn.
Thank you. And also the home of A.P.E.X. as well. And you are one of the main champions, I think, for experiential learning on campus, kind of the captain of the ship in some ways.
Well, early on when the process began with our involvement on a formal steering committee to write a new academic roadmap for the Division of Academic Affairs, my job was to be part of the subcommittee that wrote a white paper that laid the foundation later for a lot of the work that's in place now. So, yeah, from the beginning I was sort of there, and it's been fun to sort of champion the work of other people who have sort of taken on the mantle and moved forward with it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to ask you how, and maybe we'll get into this a little later, how it has changed, since the sort of germ stages, the initial stages of trying to get this more prominent on campus to now where it's being embraced on a bigger level. So we'll get into that as well. And welcome.
Lynn, thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome.
So my name is Ann Diekema, and I'm one of the fabulous librarians. Well, I'm not saying I'm fabulous, but the librarians are all fabulous at SUU.
That's so true.
And I specifically work on instruction. And with that, I work on the dreaded LM 1010 information literacy, but we're working on completely revamping it based on student feedback. And I'm also a supportive role. So I support all these other faculty members that do experiential learning and other things in their classrooms.
And your perspective, I think, is going to be interesting because you've been an avid conference goer. You've gone to a few different experiential learning conferences. So I'm sort of curious to hear what your perspective of the national scene, because you've probably had a little more exposure with different sessions and the way things are going in other parts of the nation.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. And one of my favorite people. And Jeb, if you'd like to introduce yourself to us.
Hold on, I'm still writing the check to you. Okay. My name is Jeb Brandon. I'm the Associate Dean of the School of Integrative and Engaged Learning and the Executive Director of the Experiential Learning Leadership Institute. I also teach a little bit in the theater department and do a study abroad program for them, which study abroad is a type of experiential education, experiential learning that's transformative for students. So I'm really lucky because I get to work directly with students and see the transformation in their lives through experiential education, as well as work at the administrative level to help sort of guide policies and procedures and approaches to experiential learning and education at the university.
It seems like most of your instruction has had that experiential element and in your teaching and in a wide range of topics and disciplines. And now with the semester or study abroad and those kinds of things too, you really get to sort of amass it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost all of the academic disciplines have components, be they major or minor, that are experiential in nature. Certainly you teach music. I mean, it is inherently experiential insofar as you are doing studio work and you're working with students in hands-on experiences. But the concept of experiential education that we're talking about is outside the classroom types of experiences, taking that education and finding transferable skills and applying them in ways that are really meaningful to students. I mean, one thing we know about students over the last several years is they really want to understand relevancy of what it is they're doing and why they're doing it and how it's going to apply to their lives. That relevancy becomes more obvious through experiential education, experiential learning, because they are taking those skills and they are often having to find ways to take skills that they've learned theoretically and apply them in ways that are very different than they had ever imagined.
Right.
To projects and opportunities and, pardon the use of the word, experiences that are outside the classroom. And it really, for a lot of students, helps crystallize the relevancy of a traditional higher education as well as how important experiential education is.
Well, that's kind of a great segue to what I wanted to talk about next, which is how do we define experiential learning? We are sort of used to defining it, speaking about it. It's language we're familiar with now. But let's say somebody's listening to the show, or let's say there's a faculty member who doesn't really know, or even just somebody you're trying to say, hey, this is what I do. How would you define it? Does anybody have any thoughts? I mean, Jeb just kind of gave us a nice sort of broad thing, but how would you define experiential learning to somebody who doesn't know? Does anybody want to jump in?
I'll make a comment on that. It's funny that nationally there's still a debate about the definition of experiential learning. There are different forms of experiential learning. For example, there's what we call active learning. There's project-based learning. There's a variety of there's internships. There's a variety of different ways that students engage in an experience. But there's one common thread that tends to define when experiential learning is happening, and that is guided reflection. That's when the learning occurs. So when people go out and participate in active learning exercises, what they need to be able to do is step away from the experience in an environment that encourages them to think and ponder and analyze what the experience did for them, how it helped them, what they would do differently, how it fuels their own imagination moving forward. And that's where learning occurs. And so early on, when we were sort of proposing what later became the EDGE program, there was sort of this debate even on campus about what constituted experiential learning. And really the point that we were trying to drive forward is that it's longitudinal, it's process-oriented, it's not something that occurs because somebody shows up and does something. There's a developmental process involved, but ultimately in the experience, there has to be this ability to reflect and think about what they did and articulate how it helped them grow as an individual, how it helps change their, or not change, but how it helps guide their own thinking about the work that they do, and how what they did will influence what they will do next. So there's a variety of different ways to look at that, but there's really no universal standard definition that the industry can agree upon. There are different forms of experiential learning, but again, woven throughout this process is this notion of reflection, and that's really where the learning takes place.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add?
Well, one of the questions then becomes, so, if the norm nationally can't define it, then how do we operationalize it at the university?
Right.
And we've worked very closely, and Southern Utah University has become what is known as a strategic partner with the National Society of Experiential Education. And as opposed to trying to provide a one-size-fits-all definition, the National Society of Experiential Education, or NSEE, provides 8 principles of best practice. And these 8 principles can be applied to a variety of types of experiential education. And if that experiential education includes each of these 8 components, then you can be assured that it is going to be richly educational and deeply reflective. And so the work that we do at the university as a whole, in large part, is informed by making sure that these best practices are utilized. And specifically within SEAL, we often will begin with the 8 practices in mind as we develop programs. Patrick is on the board of directors for NSEE. NSEE also has an academic certification through what's called the Experiential Education Academy. And you can graduate from the academy through taking a series of required and elective courses, just like any graduation. And these different courses help faculty members better understand how to utilize it. And we have at least 3 faculty members for the EEA, so Experiential Education Academy faculty members, and myself and Lilani Niatu and Todd Peterson, Dr. Todd Peterson, teach in this academy. And so we have an opportunity to travel to some of these workshops and teach all colleagues from around the country these courses. Cool. This helps provide a standard of practice that elevates the quality, regardless of whether or not you are trying to do internships or service learning, or study abroad, or you're looking at richly active learning in the K-12 system, or things like that.
Right.
If you can achieve these standards and apply these principles, you can be assured of the quality of the learning.
Right. Okay. I have a question about that. But, Anne, did I see you do a celebratory dance because you're now certified?
Yep. I finished my last class when we were in Flagstaff.
Congratulations.
And it was on reflection, which is my favorite topic, and it was taught by Dr. Todd Peterson, as a matter of fact.
Well, and listeners of the show will also recognize Dr. Todd Peterson because he was actually on the podcast a few weeks ago talking about his new book. So that's the same guy we're talking about. He gets around. Well, I'd love to get more into the reflection point in one of our next little segments here. I did want to just make sure that anybody listening can get a hold of those 8 best practices. Where's the easiest way to find those?
I'm the librarian, so
yes,
let me tell you. So anyway, use Google and put in NSEE and 8 principles. Then you should find it.
Perfect.
It'll get you to the page.
I really love that because I do think sometimes there's terminology confusion that can arise. And so rather than thinking of it, experiential learning is all these words, rather the set of practices as being the guiding principles, I think is great. So thanks for that, all of that. All right, it's time for a little bit of music, and I've got a couple songs for you. This first song is Il et Elle, and it's it's by Brock, but also a great African singer, Miriam Makeba, who I've featured on the show before, is featured on this track. So you are listening to the Apex Hour. This is KSUU Thunder 91.1.
Tizakwenzani umbikangaka windokwenzani umbikangaka tizakwenzani umbikangaka uyabona bekola shanje uyabona magqirha oya uyabona bekola shanje uyabona magqirha oya walilumjana uhlake ngameva asibobeva itolopia ayilomjana uyakuthanda ukuboyanyiswa esindongeni andikhathali noma kuteni isana sami singomile andikhathali noma kuteni isana sami singomile walila walila lomjana walila uhlake ngameva asibobeva itolopia ayilomjana uyakuthanda andikhathali noma kuteni isana sami singomile iyo 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 ayo iyo
Ton coup d'art de la vie est un coup dur qui fait tomber les masques, les armures, il et elle, ensemble saturent, y'a cassure, y'a beaucoup de femmes seules, car y'a beaucoup moins de gassure. Nommé va. Ton coup d'art révèle des choses dures, révèle des fissures, des faits qui relèvent de l'impur, des aspects sombres de l'humaine nature, quand la passion l'emporte sur la raison, faute de dialogue, communication, il et elle, finissent dos au mur. Nommé va. Ton coup d'art de la vie est un coup dur, et parents riment parfois avec être immature, qui lors de querelles en arrive à négliger leur progéniture. Nommé va. Ton coup d'art a une importance réelle, révèle que il rime avec un fidèle et coupable de le péché originel.
Okay, so we're back here at the Apex Hour, and that song was called Il et Elle, and the artist is Brock, but it features Miriam Makeba, a really wonderful African singer, and you can definitely check both of those artists out. This is the Apex Hour. You're listening to KSUU Thunder 91.1, and we're back with kind of a roundtable of people who love and believe in and are passionate about experiential learning, which we are really embracing here at SUU and just really reaping the benefits in seeing what happens with our students when we embrace this way, this model. So I'd like to kind of get back to it and talk about the teaching and talk about how experiential learning plays out on a practical level. And so I'm wondering if maybe we could start with Sylvia, if you could share just some of your either tactics or feelings or kind of ways that you really approach it and bring it into your teaching.
Sure. First of all, I have seen a huge transformation in our students once they started participating in experiential learning. So about 3 years ago, no, actually more like 2 years ago, we piloted our new curriculum in our ESL program. In order to make it more experiential, we worked on it for some time and kind of included some experiential elements in a way so that 3 of our 6 proficiency levels are now completely project-based. But that doesn't mean that we don't do experiential learning in our task-based levels. That just means those levels that are project-based give students the full term, which in our case is 7 weeks, to work on a project of their choice. And so I feel very fortunate because I get to teach the introductory project-based level for students who have maybe never ever had any kind of experiential learning in their life. And so, they're coming to us, and keep in mind, these are international students. Most of them are 17 to 20 years old, from a variety of countries and educational systems and backgrounds. And so, there can be at first a little bit of kind of opposition because they are shocked. Where are the worksheets? Where is the grammar? Where is the pronunciation? Where is,
You find that generally students coming from abroad expect a little more traditional.
Yes. And, something Dr. Todd Peterson brought to my mind a couple of weeks ago. He said, be careful using this word traditional because that's essentially what we're doing now is we're trying to get back to more traditional way of learning,
right.
Being experiential. But but I do find that the students coming from those more conventional systems of teaching language, they need more structure. And sometimes you give them a lot of choice and they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
And so because our terms are so short, we have a kind of limited opportunity to sell them on the idea in the first week and then still hope they get 5 weeks to work on a project.
Right.
Nonetheless, like I said earlier, it's been really amazing to see some of the same students coming through our program, 2-3 terms later. So after they've had at least one project-based class, come to a task class and still use some of those transferable skills without being told to use them.
Right.
And, maybe they don't even think about it a lot of times because I like to say we're tricking them into learning.
Right.
Sometimes they don't really realize what it is that they're gaining. Mm-hmm. And then seeing them use it in consecutive levels is really exciting. I'm not saying this happens 100% of the time, but when it does, I know that it is because of experiential learning. I know it's because of those project classes.
And when you design them, what kinds of things do you go to the 8 practices that we were talking about? Or can you give us some examples of particularly successful projects or practices that you found?
Yes. What I can tell you is we have our own set of student learning outcomes, of course. And so we have to make sure that we're meeting them. But in the meantime, as we're meeting them, the way we designed our project-based courses is so that each assignment is focused on the project. Mm. So to give you an example, a student will come in to this project-based class and get a list of kind of guiding questions to help them think of a topic on their own or arrive at a topic, or maybe expose them to something interesting that might stimulate kind of self-inquiry or curiosity in them. So for example, saying, what have you always wanted to know more about but never had a chance to do it? Or what have you tried and failed and would like to try again? Right. So, for example, one of my favorite projects ever was a student who created basically a way to enhance your wireless internet signal in your dorm.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
It was an immediate kind of problem solver student who had an issue in his dorm. And so he chose this for his project. And for 5 weeks, he worked on it, collecting primary, secondary research, interviewing people on and off campus, going out into the local community, finding Radio Shack and so on and so forth. And again, keep in mind, these are in many cases beginner language proficiency students. So it takes, they're building confidence. They're learning how to approach a stranger in a foreign language and many other metacognitive kind of skills.
That's great.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's wonderful.
I'm super excited, so I have to stop talking because I could go on forever.
That's wonderful. I think it's great. And I love that you touched on that concept of that we're really actually getting back to sort of original ways of learning, and that's kind of, we're actually getting back to traditional learning in that way by doing that. Does anybody else have any teaching experiences or tactics or advice for teaching or things that you use that you'd like to share?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I run a study abroad program. And I mean, I think at first blush, people would assume that it's just inherently experiential, and that's true. But that doesn't mean that it's inherently experiential learning.
Right.
So we have built into the process not only sort of traditional means of reflection, consider what you did and write about it.
Right.
But we have on-site daily reflection activities that we do while we're traveling. And every morning we meet, and every morning we, through sort of some, I don't know that the students are fully aware that I'm guiding through some different types of thought, but prompt them with some questions. So, say, okay, so last night, so these are my theater students. So last night we went to Shakespeare's Globe, and you experienced this. How is it different than when you go to a more modern theater experience? And then what do those differences tell us? And what did they tell us about the experience of being in the theater, and what did they tell us about how we process what it is that we're seeing, and how does it change how we approach and think about what it is we're seeing and learning? And so these guided reflections every morning become sort of the linchpin, because then that day, as we go out and are experiencing the new things for that day,
Right.
they are processing that, tomorrow, I'm going to be doing some reflection on this, and we're going to be getting some pointed questions about, not only what we've been experiencing, but what are we learning from that experience. Next morning, have the reflection, and then that day, now they have 2 days worth of reflection, helping to inform that as they experience, they're beginning to process the learning part that comes with it. And so, one of the ideas of experiential education is that it really is like a spiral.
Yeah.
That every time you do it, you should be able to the next time do it even better and gain more from the process. It's, we draw it sometimes and it looks like a circle, but really it should be spiraling up.
Oh, I like that.
And so we get an opportunity to see that day after day after day on these study abroads. And so it doesn't just become something they're doing. They really are processing what they're doing in a way that really informs learning.
Cool. Well, that gets into the reflection component, which I'd love to talk more about. And I know that's something you're really passionate about. And so can you share, why the reflection component means so much to you and what it means to you, and just talk about that, because I know it's something you like.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And that there's a quote from John Dewey. I don't know. He was a philosopher, but also an educator. And he says, we do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience.
Oh.
So just having an experience is not enough, right? You need to really think about, what did this mean? What did I learn? How would I do it differently? Without that reflection, it's kind of, it's still useful, but reflection just puts it on.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And so how did that just always jump out at you as the key piece, or is that something that you saw the results of many times? Or did you just kind of initially connect with that, like, oh, this really makes sense to me?
Yeah, I think as a life practice, reflection is really, really useful. So if you just kind of float along and never think about anything, you cannot improve, you can't really learn. So that always has made sense to me. So adapting it or including it in an educational experience made so much sense. Now, sometimes you read about something and you're like, oh, this makes so much sense. I'm going to try this with my students. And it really, really works. Yeah. So the challenge is, though, that I found is you can't just tell students to reflect. Mm-hmm. Right. It's difficult. It requires thought, time, introspection. And those are all skills we need to teach students and guide them along. What is a good reflection? What is a bad reflection? And so on. So
for the teachers listening, and we may have, not just college teachers, but teachers of all different age groups listening, Do any of you have any advice? Maybe they're thinking, wow, I'd really like to bring this reflection component into my classroom, into my learning environments. Does anybody have any advice for how to get going with that?
Well, just a quick comment, and then I'll let some of the faculty members talk a little bit more about it. But the prompts that are used to help, and I use the term from the beginning, guided reflection, right? You just don't say, go reflect on it. Well, what is reflection, and what is effective reflection, and what kind of prompts elicit the kinds of responses and thinking that we want students to engage in? So there's a careful design process about how you guide that reflection. And so in our curriculum that we use in, for example, the EDGE program, the questions that help guide that for students have been well crafted and designed to help students do deeper level thinking about the process. But one thing we haven't talked about very much is this idea of intentionality. So we talk a lot about reflection, but reflection comes after the experience, but before the experience is the idea of thinking about it before you actually do it. And one thing that is part of our brand at SUU relative to experiential learning is we challenge students to articulate as much as they can about what it is they're going to do before they do it, in a way that sets up the experience to be deeper, richer, more meaningful for the student, but then gives them a chance, because you can't really reflect until you think about, well, what were your expectations before you did the thing, then you did the thing, and now what did you learn? So intentionality is just as important and vital in this process as I think reflection is. And a lot of times that's where students struggle, because of their lack of experience with things. They're not quite sure how to think about what it is they're going to do. They just want to do it so they can get the experience. But when someone is asked to do more work before they actually do something, it makes the experience of doing it that much richer and deeper for the students. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is this idea of intentionality.
Yeah, intentionality before, then the experience happens, and then the reflection. I think that's a really clean, easy way to sort of, for new people to really kind of embrace that. That's great.
And that's why it's longitudinal, right? It's not something you can do quickly.
Right.
It's developmental and longitudinal, and that's one of the pieces that has to be understood.
Right.
And I think that Patrick said that that's sometimes hard for students. I would say that that's sometimes very hard for faculty members.
Right.
Because faculty members, if you are going to let your students' experiential learning be authentic, then that means that they need to make some of the decisions, if not many or most of the decisions. They need to come up with the ideas for what they want to do, why they want to do it, how they're going to do it, what they hope to learn from it. The processes, even things like the risk management, things like the international student who worked on Wi-Fi improvement for his dormitory. Part of what made that successful was, I imagine, that it was something that he or she wanted to do and was something that they got excited about. But if they had come to class and said, okay, your project this semester, students, is you're all going to go and examine the Wi-Fi strength of your dormitory rooms, and many students would have never connected with that because that wasn't their thing. And so that is hard for faculty members to say. They'll often say to us, well, what do I tell them to do? I say, oftentimes you don't tell them to do anything.
Right.
You let them tell you.
But
and
it
that's
can
scary.
be very freeing. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when they get started with it, that it can be very freeing as well. Like, I think sometimes faculty members, or maybe just me, fall into the trap of, I have to have everything all solved for them. I have to figure everything out so that everything works, and I think it's a nice message to tell people that no, if you go into some of these processes and some of these practices, you don't have to have everything figured out. I mean, you actually want them to be figured, and I think that can be actually freeing if you can get your brain around it.
Sure, well, it can be, because then you also have to ask the question, what happens when they fail?
Right.
They come up with this plan, they try and go ahead and execute it, it
Right.
doesn't work.
Exactly.
Well, if you have embraced the idea that it's the learning associated with the experience, not the experience, then again, that's liberating, because the project itself can not turn out the way they had hoped to at all. I mean, can fail.
Right.
And yet the learning associated with that experience can be incredibly rich. And, isn't that life?
Yeah.
Don't we learn a lot more sometimes from our failures and our successes? Because it forces reflection as opposed to just celebration and back patting. It forces us, what went wrong? And how we don't like failure. So we say, how will I make sure this doesn't happen to me again? Which is essentially a reflection. And so I think that's part of the authenticity of experiential learning, is the fact that we in education aren't real comfortable with the idea of failure equals success.
Yeah.
And maybe we should be a little bit more.
Exactly. And you had something you wanted to add?
Well, some things that Patrick mentioned all kind of hail back to the 8 principles we were talking about earlier. So for a good experience, there has to be that intention from the student, but also from the faculty member to plan it. And also, you may not lay out what the projects are going to be, but you have to provide that foundation, right? Before you set your students loose. So that's really important. An authentic experience. I know Sylvia sends her students to the ice cream shop where they have to order, which is petrifying when you don't speak the language.
Right.
Like, if I went to China, I probably couldn't order ice cream to save my life. That reflection piece we already talked about, but also orientation and training related to the experience. And this is more internship related, I imagine. And then monitoring, like, how is the activity, how is the experience going? How can we improve it? And then something we haven't talked about yet today is assessment and evaluation, which we have to kind of see how did things turn out? We had this plan, what happened? And then in the end, talking about celebration, there has to be, that's the 8th principle, acknowledgement. So celebrate with the student that this activity has been completed, and you get a nice certificate or something showing that you completed it.
So again, those 8 principles, so the 8 best practices can be a great model. Well, let me get another song and going, and then let's come back and talk about this trip that we just took, where we all got a chance to really get exposed to some great sessions and learn even more. And that was at our LE conference that was at the end of June in Flagstaff, Arizona. But in the meantime, I've got a song by Stevie Wolf, and it's Eve's Climb Blue, and this is the A.P.E.X. Hour on KSUU Thunder 91.1.
Could you ever know me at all? Could you ever know me at all? I don't think that I believe in love right now. Seems like always ends in tears and twisted mouths. I keep mine. All these walls we start behind. Another cane runner, hurricane's daughter. Wanna be closer, keep pushing you farther. I see you like Eve Klein blue, when everything else is black and white. Draw me near, I know you hear the symphony underneath my quiet. Could you ever know me at all? Could you ever know me at all? I get lost behind my fingertips. Oh, I can't fit all my soul blue when everything else is black and white. Could you have known me at all? Could you have known me at all? I see you like Eve Klein blue when everything else is black and white. Draw me near, I know you hear the symphony underneath my quiet. Nobody been trying. Nobody been trying. Nobody been trying. Nobody been trying. I see you like Eve Klein blue when everything else is black and white. Draw me near, I know you hear the symphony underneath my quiet. Could you have known me at all? Could you have known me at all?
Okay, welcome back, everyone. That was Eve Climb Blue by Stevie Wolf, and this is Lynn Vartan, and you're listening to the A.P.E.X. Hour. Today, our topic is experiential learning, and one of the things that inspired that was that we all just came back from a really amazing conference, which we nicknamed, well, because of the acronym, the ELLE Conference, which was in Flagstaff, Arizona. So, Jeb, would you mind just kind of giving us an overview of what ELLE is, what it stands for? What is this conference?
Sure. So the ELLE stands for the Experiential Learning Leadership Institute. It's an organization within Southern Utah University that promotes experiential learning nationwide. It has sort of multiple facets to it, one of which is this annual conference that we do for educators in higher education, K-12, and from the nonprofit world.
Oh, right.
We have attendees come from all over the United States and Canada. We also have what we call a leadership retreat, where say I work at an institution and 3 or 4 of my colleagues and I have a great idea as to something we want to launch at our school, but we just haven't figured it all out yet. We haven't walked through the process.
And there's never time to do that.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
a year.
Exactly. So we have this retreat where schools from around North America write applications to ELLE and say, here is the team we've put together. Here's what we want to do. Can we attend your retreat? And then ELLE brings consultants from around the country who have particular expertise in doing this type of work. And we go to a place outside of Moab that's very, very isolated.
And very beautiful.
And we walk the teams through sort of a process for spending a few days focused, and then we set them loose. And the teams work and report to the consultants and develop these projects. And then they come back because reflection is important and assessment is important. Then they come back to our annual conference and do sessions and report on their progress.
Great.
We also do consulting work. We get calls all the time from around the country and around the world even asking for guidance in different aspects of experiential learning. Southern Utah University is really on sort of the front edge of this. We're one of the very first,
cool.
if not the first university to have a graduation requirement in experiential education where the students authored the projects, as opposed to saying everybody who comes to our school is going to graduate, they're going to all do service learning, or they're going to all do study abroad, or, we really laid it out and we provided a shepherding experience where the students created it and worked on it through their time at school. And so people call us all the time. And so we provide consulting both here at SUU and on other campuses, and then connecting with people through the Leadership Institute and the conference and things like that. We've also been developing some things specifically for K-12 so that we can better partner with them. And our annual conference, we just had our fourth annual conference, is the one
I was curious
in
how
Arizona.
Many. Yeah.
Next year will be our 5th anniversary, which is exciting for us. We grow every year and getting bigger and bigger.
And next year, for anybody interested, we will be hosting it here in Cedar City.
We will. Next year we'll be focusing on the national parks of southern Utah. So one of the things we try and do is put our money where our mouth is. So as opposed to a conference where you go and spend the entire time in session after session after session, we do recognize the value of not traditional, but conventional classroom type of learning, right? And so our conference is sort of a hybrid. There are regular sessions where we learn from each other and people submit proposals and do best practices and present their research. But then we go out. We take the conference out and we do excursions. We have done everything from, going through the national parks to poetry writing to bird watching to geology to service-oriented things. We just take the conference participants and they do these experiences and get an opportunity to reflect on them. And we try and provide such a rich array that there can be some authenticity, because we let them choose which of these excursions do you want to participate in, and how will you utilize this excursion to help you learn from the conference. And so next year we're going to, we hope to include Bryce Canyon, Zion. We're talking about Capitol Reef. Brian had lots of different things. SUU is the University of the Parks. And so that's going to be our focus next year.
It's a great model for a conference. And Sylvia, you presented at the conference. Can you tell us a little bit about your session? I was there. It was a really good one.
Thanks. I can. Before I do that though, I just want to kind of echo what you said, Lynn. It is a great model for a conference, and I haven't had a lot of conference experience. I can't say I've been to more than maybe 12 conferences ever, but this is by far my favorite because it's really kind of an immersion experience, because I connect with people because I'm at their presentations. I connect with people during meals. I connect with people during these excursions. And I love that, or at least the excursions I went on had an element of reflection embedded in them to really kind of solidify the cycle of experiential learning. So that was really cool. My presentation was, basically on how cultural competence and experiential learning go hand in hand, and how we can enhance one with the other and vice versa. One thing that has been brought up earlier is this idea of reflection, right? We all know it's important, but I would like to push more the idea of preflection as well. This idea of, are we assuming students want an experience, in experiential learning? And, what can we do to help them on that journey of openness and curiosity and kind of basically elements of preflection, or I don't know what to call it.
It's a little bit about that, like that intentionality that Patrick was talking about, going in with, thinking about what are you going to try to get out of this?
Yes.
And what are you trying to get to? Yeah.
And just being aware of your own expectations of the experience and then translating those to your instructor or professor, can be a really instrumental tool in looping the reflection with the next one and the preflection and the reflection. I like this idea. This is another thing Dr. Peterson talked about at the NSEE workshop of reflection was, it should be revisited consistently and the term he used was looping, and that really stuck with me.
And like the spiral concept
Yes.
that Jen was talking about too. Yeah.
Exactly. It ties back to that. But I do strongly feel that reflection, or actually what I want to say is that failure is instructional. And we know that from life. We don't have to, have experiential learning teach us that. We know that it's instructional.
Right.
And so that's something I incorporated into my presentation. But the focus was mostly on cultural competence and how experiential learning can help us enhance cultural competence, which is so very important. Always has been, but especially now more than ever with, efforts to internationalize the campus and efforts to globalize the curriculum and just to get along, right?
Yeah, right.
So that was kind of what I talked about at the conference.
Great. Well, Anne, as a conference participant, you probably got to see a lot of different sessions. Do you have any memories or things you'd like to share?
One really cool one was by a guy named Dean from the University of Utah.
Oh, yeah, I heard about
From
that
the
one.
Binion Center at the University
Yes,
of Utah.
that's right. And he did kind of a group exercise with us to get a shared experience as a group. We read something together and then talked about what we saw in the piece. And he does this a lot with his student groups. And it was really fun to be a part of that.
I heard so many good things about that session. I missed that one, but I heard several people really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was super intense. And he has all these different readings on different topics that then elicit really good discussion.
Can you tell me what made that so noticeable to you or stand out so much? Was it the way he guided it, or was it the reading itself, or a combination?
It was really both. I mean, but I think mostly how he led it, just observing how he's just a very skilled person. He does this all the time with many different groups, how he could kind of let things flow, but then pull people back in. It's an art. So I really watched what he was doing. It was fascinating. And he also has this thing that I had never heard about. It's called wait. It's why am I talking? So.
Oh my gosh. I love
Because some
that.
people just go, yabbity, yabbity, yabbity. But he says, okay, I want you to be aware of this wait thing. So everybody gets a word in. And yeah, it was just really well done.
I love that.
So if you ever get a chance to see him in action.
And what was his name one more time? Dean.
Dean. He's the executive director of the Binion Center.
Okay.
Which is one of the nation's premier service learning community engagement centers. And they do incredible work there.
Great.
And are a national model. All the community engagement centers and service learning centers and all the higher education institutions in Utah work together and partner on a lot of projects, and certainly partner on best practices, so that as a state we really do a great job with service learning and community engagement.
Well, this has just been so fascinating. We're actually already almost out of time. But before we go, I didn't even have time to play my third song, which is great. The conversation was flowing so nicely. I'd like to do my favorite little quick thing, which is just kind of go around the table and say something that's making you happy or turning you on this week. And it can be a song or a TV show or a book or really anything. It's just kind of something that inspires other people, and it could be anything. It could be like the bird I saw in my backyard, or if there's something that is just kind of you're really jazzed about this week. So, Sylvia, do you have something? What's turning you on this week?
How much time do we have? Okay, I'm gonna keep it short. I do feel inspired by birds in my backyard every day. But what's really cool for me this week is I get to finish my Damascus steel knife that I've been making.
Whoa!
And it's been a really long process. I don't know how many hours in it, but the last kind of session should happen today or tomorrow. So.
You're making a knife.
Yes, and it's Damascus steel, so it's the strongest possible steel you could ever make. So yeah, I
That's
started
pretty
from
awesome.
scratch, and
Yeah.
it's basically a project, I guess. It's really neat, and in the process, meeting some amazing people. So that's always exciting.
Well, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Patrick, how about you? What's making you happy this week?
July mornings on campus at SUU. So when the monsoons kind of kick in and things freshen up, just that warm, cool, however you want to say it, walk across campus in the morning coming to work. Just no better place than the SUU campus on a summer morning. So that's got me jazzed this week.
Beautiful. Thank you. Anne, how about you?
Okay, I don't watch TV, but I recently found James Corden's carpool karaoke sessions online.
Yes.
And they're so much fun. I mean, it just shows that music bridges so many cultures.
Yes.
And he can just interact with these very famous people. I guess he's pretty famous himself now. But at such a personal level, all with music, it's amazing to watch. The energy and the happiness in those videos is so cool.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome. Those are great. I love them. Jeb, how about you?
Oh, well, I had an awesome experience yesterday. So one of the actresses at the Utah Shakespeare Festival is somebody that I went to college with and have done some work with. And two of our friends from college who are also both incredible artists, they wanted to come down and see Colleen perform in The Foreigner, and I got a text and saying, "Hey, we're all going to meet at the French Spot. We'd love to see you." And so the four of us got together, and it was just, I mean, we were practically in tears. And for several of us, we hadn't seen each other in, 25 or more years. And we were chuckling. It was like, I haven't seen you in person, but yet I know the name of your dog, and I know what you had for dinner yesterday because of social media context. But it just wasn't the same thing as to be able to hug him. And I've just been on cloud nine ever since. So it was
That's
really
just
cool.
beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing. My thing that's making me happy or turned me on this week is I started a new book that I heard about on a podcast, which is about a very old topic. And it's not nearly as like warm and fuzzy as everything that everybody's mentioned, but it's the Jeffrey Toobin book called American Heiress, which is the Patty Hearst story, which I didn't really know much about. I don't really know that story very well. And I mean, it reads like a novel. I mean, and his writing is so great. And I heard him on the podcast, Here's the Thing, which I really love, which is Alec Baldwin's interview podcast. And I just thought I'd pick up that book and check it out. And it is really something. So I'd like to thank my panel for being here today. Thank you guys so much for sharing about experiential learning in the conference and for being on the show. Thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks for
Thanks,
having us.
Lynn.
Yeah.
All right, we're signing off for the A.P.E.X. Hour here on KSUU Thunder 91.1. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the A.P.E.X. Hour here on KSUU Thunder 91.1. Come find us again next Thursday at 3 p.m. for more conversations with the visiting guests at Southern Utah University and new music to discover for your next playlist. And in the meantime, we would love to see you at our events on campus. To find out more, check out suu.edu/APEX. Until next week, this is Lynn Vartan saying goodbye from the A.P.E.X. Hour here on Thunder 91.1.